It's fun. I can see the attendees coming online there on the right there with the participants. I've got like 10:59 here, so I guess we'll give it about another minute or two. Make sure other folks are joining on. We're up to about 30 attendees already, so seems like the internet's working well in our quarantine world. So hopefully it'll do well for all of us on this webinar. Okay, for the folks joining, we're going to go through some introductions in just a minute or two, and then go through, we have some questions for our panelists today, and then you can also ask questions as well. There's a question and answer part of the Zoom platform here, and you can post your questions, and my colleague Morgan on the early career board is going to be able to help us with those and bring those questions to our attention and everything. So that'll be good. I should be able to get through a lot over the course of the next hour here. So we'll start in about 1 or 2 minutes here, just make sure when other folks are still joining. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for attending today. It's a interesting topic because we're getting to that time of year when folks are starting to look for work again as the school year starts to wind down, traditionally anyway. But appreciate you joining us today on this topic on cover letters. This is a joint webinar with the Board of Early Career Professionals and also the Board for Private Sector Meteorologists. So it's a combined effort here to kind of bring you some more information. And we've got some great panelists today. For some reason, we have all of our panelists, first names start with the letter J or K. I don't know how we did that, but got 4 of them here for you. And also my colleague Morgan is on as well. She's part of our subcommittee on webinars for the Early Career Board, and she's going to be helping me with the Q&A there as well. So my name is Matt Rogers. I'm one of the co-founders and president of the Commodity Weather Group in the Washington, D.C. area. I'm also part of the Board of Early Career Professionals, and we'll be helping you do the moderating today. So let's see, I'll start with Christine. We'll do some quick introductions, and then we'll start with some questions from the moderator, and then we'll go to the Q&A from the audience as well. So I'll start with Christina. Go ahead and give us a quick introduction there.
All right, my name is Christina Pitanowski. I graduated from Penn State in 2004 with my BS degree in meteorology. And since that time, I've been at AccuWeather. I spent most of the last 15 years as an operational forecaster and senior meteorologist, but now I'm a talent acquisition specialist. So you may think, okay, what is the meteorologist now doing in HR as talent acquisition? Well, during a lot of my time with the forecasting department, I was on the hiring team. So I reviewed a lot of resumes, cover letters, and I was heavily involved with the interview process. And I really enjoyed that recruiting part of my career. So when this position opened up last summer, I applied for it and was fortunate enough to be selected. So now I'm taking that and, my recruiting skills and looking at resumes to, most of the company. Given my background, I primarily focus on the STEM careers we have at AccuWeather. So, instead of just looking at resumes and interviewing, just at those few times a year, I do it on a daily basis.
Great, thank you very much, appreciate it. I'm gonna go over to Kai and give us a quick introduction there too.
All right. Well, great. Thank you, Matt. My name is Kai O'Mara, and I'm originally from Iowa City, Iowa, and I graduated from Iowa State University back in 2007. And I had a Bachelor of Science degree in 2007 and got hired on at KCRG TV at Cedar Rapids shortly after graduating full time. And I had done some internships in the year or two prior to that point. Started off at weekend mornings, and once we got to about September of '09, the staff kind of moved a little bit and I went to weekday mornings, and I've been in that position ever since. Just did a show from home this morning that was actually the smoothest show yet of the week. So very pleased with that so far in this new little world that we're in. The thing about us that I find that's very unique, first off, the broadcast sector is very different when it comes to meteorology than almost all the other sides of this, and just kind of how we operate and how people are kind of moved around. But we had a really big benefit for a long time. We were locally owned. We were not owned by anybody except for ourselves. And so as a result, when staff came and went, we actually had a fairly strong say into who came into our building. And my chief and I have worked together now for quite some time, and we have a lot of input. Our midday meteorologist also, we kind of rope him in on some of this stuff. And so we've seen some cover letters and resumes, not nearly as much as what Christina would have, but we find ourselves lucky in the broadcast side that we actually have some really good meetings with our news director and management about who's coming into the weather team, because longevity is one of our big staples at KCRG. Our chief's been there 30 years. I'm going on 14, and Justin, our midday Met, is going on 11. So our weekdays just don't turn over much. So we're pretty proud of that.
Yeah, that's really impressive for TV. That's neat.
It's unheard of. It's absolutely unheard of. Yeah.
I know, that's excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's move over to the Jays now. So Justin, go ahead and give us a quick rundown there. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Justin Pullen. I am originally from Louisiana, and I graduated from the University of Louisiana Monroe. Since then, I actually started my career in the private sector at AccuWeather Enterprise Solutions. and then quickly moved over to the government side of things. I've worked at now 3 National Weather Service offices, started out in the Las Vegas office, then I moved over to Tallahassee, and now I'm currently a senior forecaster in the Seattle office. During my time in Tallahassee, I spent most of my time there, so around 3 or so years, on the student volunteer team. So I was able to be on the other side for once and actually review resumes and cover letters and get the sense of what that's like going through a lot of applications. So that's inspired me to take on more of a mentorship role now that I'm a senior forecaster. Our student volunteer program is still in its infancy here, but I like to reach out and help those coming up to tailor their cover letters to success. So happy to be here today.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I've spent my entire life in the private sector, so Justin's educating me that you do need cover letters to apply for the government too, and you need a lot of information. So this is going to be great today. And then finally, Joel Widener, my co-founder.
Matt, yeah, so I am a Penn State grad from back in '97, and Matt and I actually both started our careers with another company at the time, MDA Earthsat, before starting Commodity Weather Group back in 2009 now. But because we're a small team at Commodity Weather Group, a little bit of a different twist, I guess, than some of the other folks here today too, where we don't have a lot of turnover. We're proud of that. We have a pretty small team too. Right now, 13 of us total. So we don't do frequent hiring, but when we do, we get kind of an onslaught, an avalanche of applicants, of course, typically somewhere between 100 and 200. And, my full-time job is agricultural meteorologist. I focus on that side of things. That's kind of where I do most of my work. But then when we get into a hiring phase, I'm the one who pretty much screens all the incoming cover letters and resumes and filters it down to a more manageable level before I hand it on to our other business partners and Matt. There's 4 of us total, but so I'm kind of the first round to take a look, and it always helps when there's something that stands out to show that somebody's really got something unique to offer when going through those cover letters, especially when there's so many of them.
Yeah, it's good that you're our first filter on those. All right, so I guess I'm going to start with some questions I had put together and do kind of a roundtable discussion, and then we'll go through questions from the audience as well. Looks like we're up to a good number, 48 attendees. Thank you all for joining today. Appreciate it. So I'll start with the bad stuff first. What are some typical errors you tend to see in cover letters? And maybe if there's like one that stands out to you, like what was maybe the worst one you ever saw, or something, something that really stands out to you, something that maybe do not do. Anyone can take off on that if you want.
I guess I'll start here. I think, the most common errors you see is just people don't tailor it to the company, and you're applying to so many jobs and you just are using the same cover letter. Well, the worst thing you can do is, like for AccuWeather, I see a cover letter that says, "Hello, hiring manager for the Weather Channel."
Yes.
You definitely do not want that. So it's
Seen
just,
that.
yeah, you really want to tailor your cover letters to the company because, you want to tell your story and, make it relatable. So those are the errors I would see.
Yes, definitely. We've seen that before as well. Yep. That's great. Anybody else?
I'll jump in. That was actually I was going to mention that as the most obvious error before was indeed being addressed to the wrong company. But some of the other ones that are always we're very focused on writing in our space, that a lot of our products are in writing, and one of the things that can really jump out is just a lack of proofreading. Just, I'm not saying it has to be the most wonderful cover letter ever, but if there's just obvious grammar or spelling errors that show that there wasn't an attention to detail before that was pushed out the door, it can really, put you at a disadvantage. So I think it's just really important to take the time to look through. And the other thing I was going to mention is that a lot of times folks will focus on just, kind of a rundown of their basic academic background. And I think it's important to realize that, everyone that you're competing against often has that same background. So, that it's more important to highlight what makes you different as opposed to kind of running through and focusing on, what is the same as the rest of the folks that are also candidates for that position.
Are you hinting about the I've loved meteorology since the start of my life line?
That would be one example.
Yeah. Yeah, we're all in the same boat almost, it seems. So, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback off of what Joel said, and that's a lot of good stuff. My personal pet peeve being on the other end reviewing resumes is the person that states, oh, I have a lot of attention to detail, and then they have all of the grammatical errors and the spelling errors. So don't be that person. Always have, a second, a third, a fourth pair of eyes looking at your cover letter before you submit it. The other big one is regurgitating what's already on the resume. The cover letter is in addition to the resume, and that is your opportunity to show the potential employer what you're about. So use that opportunity to, tell a story. Why are you going to be a good fit for whatever position you're applying for? What can you bring to the team? That's your opportunity to do that. And you don't get that point across by regurgitating what's already on the resume.
Yeah, very good. Yep, thank you. That's excellent.
That was one thing I was actually going to jump in with there too, Justin, is when you see a cover letter that is simply just a long form of what the resume is. And I would think that one of the things you look for, and I know that on the reel that we call it in the broadcast world, when you submit all your things and then you've got your weather cast or your audition, you really have to impress within the first 10 or 15 seconds. And so I would say that one of the negatives is, I am thrilled to have come across your job post at X, Y, and Z, and I'd love to apply for it. Well, then go ahead and apply for it and actually tell me who you are. And you've got to give me some kind of background, some kind of context as to why you're the person for the job. And don't cut and paste some blasé line in the first part, because now I'm not interested. Now that tells me you just want to read, you want to give me a paragraph and just quickly slide this in and not actually give me a good hook right off the top. So that's the one thing I would say is weak starts. Make sure they're nice, strong starts about you.
That's good. It's very journalism-like. Don't bury the lead, so it's very broadcasting journalism. Yeah.
Yep. Every cover letter, resume, everything at top, because, we were all saying how we get so many resumes and cover letters. So you got to draw your attention in. You have to assume someone may spend no more than 15 seconds, 30 seconds looking at your resume cover letter. So to Kai's point, what are you going to do? Draw them in.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's excellent. So I guess that's a good segue into what are the best qualities you do find in cover letters. What are the ones that really kind of knock your socks off that you've seen, and or things you recommend for folks? Besides that one, maybe not burying the lead, I think is really huge. So
I think you did research on the company and you wove that into the letter. You took it kind of goes back to my first point of, how everybody, some people have a cover letter that just fits one for all, but it's just that you took the time, wove that in, kind of, again, writing that story, draw it in. I think those really are the best ones and, capture my attention.
Yeah, that's great. Yep. Anyone else? Yeah.
I'm going to say format. Format's a big one. You want something that's going to be pleasing to the eye and something that you can follow from top to bottom really easily. You can write a really good cover letter, but if it's all over the place, if the formatting is messy, if you go, beyond one page, then that's going to be something that gets you thrown right to the bottom. So formatting is very important. That's something to keep in mind. You want something that's nice, clean, and concise.
And not a super small font or anything. So yeah, that's great. Anybody else?
I would kind of say what Christina also said in the regard of making sure that it's tailored towards the company in a very strong way, so that we aren't just writing a letter and changing who we're addressing it to and leaving the body the same. For example, in our company, we used to have a newscopter at KCRG, and we stopped the newscopter program in 2006. But from the late 90s to the mid 2000s, I mean, there's still famous clips around here of that newscopter caught this F3 tornado that went through one of our towns in 1998. And you could start a cover letter from then saying, you know, I've loved weather as long as I know, and then move on. Or you can say, that time when you covered that 1998 tornado on the copter, I was there glued to your television. And all of a sudden that news director might say, hey, I got somebody who not only knows the history of my station, but knows who my people are already. I'm probably going to keep reading into this a little bit. So just doing a little research on the company or wherever you're trying to apply to. In my world, it's TV all the way. I mean, the other sectors I would have to obviously do a lot of research for an example, but at least on the TV side, you do something like that and tell me you've been watching Channel 9 for the last 20 years. Well, then now I'm really looking at you really good. So that might be kind of saying what Christina was saying there too.
That's good. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, that's kind of your in and what makes you unique and everything. So that's great.
I would agree with everything that's been said so far on both the research of the company and the clarity and the brevity. I mean, definitely one page. Do not go beyond one page, please. But the other thing that I think really stands out to us when we're looking at resumes is something that sets you apart from all the other candidates that are coming in. And that doesn't, a lot of times I think folks think that means that it has to be something related to either, you know, the academic work they've done or the internships they've done. And for us, you know, I mean, we're huge on customer service as a good example. And some of the best resumes that I've received are when someone talks about how they, you know, especially if they give a real life example of somehow, you know, maybe it was in a retail sort of a situation where they really were able to, you know, show that they had that customer service ability and they have that experience from real life. And a lot of times that doesn't necessarily mean that you know, did XYZ, you know, classes or, you know, did a specific internship. It's about those other experiences in your life that really create, you know, a personality and a character that's something that's going to be a good fit with our team.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, that's very true, especially for us with customer service stuff. That's great. Thank you. And so, like, my next question was, what was a standard acceptable length? But we've already kind of addressed that, I think. So is everyone pretty much in agreement, or is it the same way, Justin, in the government? You said it, though, too, one page.
Yeah, so in the government, one page, that's all you need to really introduce yourself and get in and get out. You know, I look through the attendees and I see a couple of folks from the government and the Weather Service in there, and they will agree with me that, you know, the resumes it's like telling a life story. So you need something off the top to begin with that shows what you're about and highlights your best attributes. That's
good. I guess Albert from the Board for Early Career, no, we're the Board for Early Career, Board for Private Sector Meteorologists, he has a question that was kind of along the lines of what some of the best qualities that I'd asked earlier, but he said he's seen and heard resumes that are exceptionally unique in terms of style and design. Have you ever encountered a similar cover letter that was just over and beyond what is typical? And what are your thoughts on being that creative? Is it risky to get too creative, I guess is his question there. Can they overdo that? And have you seen that overdone? You're like, wow, where did that come from?
I personally haven't had that experience, but, you know, we've talked about you have to do and Joel has mentioned this several times, you have to do something that sets you apart from other people. Mm-hmm. I think that is something that you can do that sets you apart. It shows that you're creative. Can you overdo it? You know, there's probably too much of a good thing, I would think. But I think if you did it correctly, you didn't bury the lead and you still got your point across, I think it's something creative that can quickly make you memorable in the eyes of a selecting committee.
I think the key would be run it by a couple people, get their thoughts. I just received, it was at the top of a resume, but it would kind of be the same thing. It said, talk to me and you'll want to hire me. You know, kind of, it wasn't quite the best draw in. And so if you want to take a shot, because yeah, as we mentioned before, you want to set yourself apart, but run it by a few people just to kind of get their opinion, and maybe run it by a family member, but also another coworker. Get a couple, you know, people from different backgrounds just to get their thoughts. If you just want to take, you know, go for something, but get some opinions.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, get a lot of perspective to see if that your angle of attack is going to be successful or not. I guess the other question I had put together for you was along those lines was, do you run into people who are maybe a little too overconfident in their cover letters, and is that a turnoff? Is there like a line there where you express your competence and what makes you unique, but do people go too far sometimes and sound too overconfident, and does that cross lines?
I mean, I know, I'm sure you can think of a couple of the ones that I'm
Well,
talking
yeah,
about.
that's where my question came from, I think. So yeah, I
But,
didn't know how
we've
common that was.
yeah, we've
Yeah.
definitely had that a few times. And I would say, that generally it's going to be a turnoff if somebody is overly confident in terms of, and by that, I don't mean, I'm talking about being aggressive, being too aggressive and being like, you have to hire me because I'm the best candidate out there. Don't take that approach. Take the approach of, here's an example of something that I did that'll make us think that you're the best candidate out there, and that'll be impressive. But if you just are too aggressive in your approach, especially for a lot of times with our situation, especially with being a small team, we're looking for people that are going to work well together. And one of the biggest concerns can be, if somebody's really aggressive in the way that their approach is, we'll be concerned that, that's not going to be a good fit. So
It goes back to Christina's point too about, getting a perspective on your tone as well. I think that,
Definitely.
yeah.
We had an incident like that. And it would not be fair to call it an incident, I guess, but with the amount of cover letters that I've seen, it's not very many, quite honestly. However, we did have an interview once, and it was one of those scenarios where for a time there, we were doing some online interviews, and we had asked somebody, one of the key questions was, what can you challenge yourself with? What can you learn more about yourself? Where do you need to improve? What can you learn more about? And the person said nothing. And they were a young individual, and we just kind of looked at each other after the fact and went, so you're saying you don't need to learn anything else in your life? That was a little bit of an
Wow.
overconfident moment right there
Yeah,
for us.
yeah.
And we kind of just took a step back. And even though it wasn't a cover letter situation, it was one of those that might be a no-no at an interview. I would kind of put that in the back of your mind as the interviewer is probably going to say, hey, it'd be great for you to come to our company. What can you be challenged on? What do you need to work on about yourself? Because everybody can work on something. And when somebody says, oh, no, I'm perfect, then, sorry, we're probably not going to hire you. That's kind of the way things are going to go. So that was our experience. We had that a couple of years ago, actually. So that was kind of a different one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are especially see one of the questions we got in the question and answer. It's about, applying to jobs that aren't explicitly meteorologists, but, you can just, yes, meteorology, it's a very humbling field. So you have to show that you've learned from mistakes, you learn from busts, but also in any position, I mean, it's life, we're human. You're going to make mistakes, and how did you learn from it? So maybe even that, if it would fit in your cover letter, just to show you've learned, you're continuing to learn stuff and you're open. So just another idea there. But yeah, to that point, to the question there, a lot of these tips, it's not just for meteorologists, it's for any position in general.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And can the attendees see those questions as they're posted as well? Or Morgan, did you want to read it out real quick? I think it's the one we've got there.
Sure. I don't know if they can see it or not. Actually, it's a good question. Any tips for anyone applying to jobs that are not explicitly meteorologists? For example, I'm looking to go into hydrology positions.
So that was good, Christina. Thank you. And I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts or comments on that as well.
I think a lot of the advice that's been given so far can apply across the board. I mean, you definitely want to do your homework and understand what the company is about or what the office is about before you write your cover letter, because as we've already mentioned, you don't want something that's generic or address a certain company by another company or something along those lines. So I think a lot of the advice here is good across the board, actually.
Yeah, I agree. I think so too.
And I think what was mentioned before, as far as like, addressing your weaknesses, I do think, especially if, maybe if your background isn't necessarily perfectly aligned with what the position is, don't try to hide that, don't try to just, ignore that, address that head on and say why you would still be, a good fit for the position, because that's naturally going to be the question that's in our mind as we're reviewing through it. And you're going to, there'll still be a chance at being considered if you're addressing it head on. If you're ignoring it, then, it's going to be a situation where, as was said earlier, you'll go to the bottom of the pile, because that's going to be the first thing in our minds.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I was just
Yeah.
going to say, take myself, for example. I said, I'm a meteorologist. I applied for this position in HR, talent acquisition specialist. If you would just look at my background, education background, you'd say, why is she even applying? So I use my cover letter to really hit on those points of, and I try to use it as a positive way. It wasn't just saying, don't start with the negative, kind of work your way, keep the positive and saying, this is what I have to bring to the table.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, a lot of times people consider things as being weaknesses, but they are strengths from other angles. Your experience as a meteorologist, for example, is a strength in the situation. So yeah, there's always, I agree with that. Yeah, and like Joel said, address it head on, and that everything is an opportunity, and you can present it that way and address it right away.
Well, I can also tell you on the television side of things that if you're going to land a 5-day-a-week job that does not involve some sort of social media work or some sort of outreach work or some sort of web article writing work, those are getting tougher and tougher. So you almost have to be cross-trained in a variety of disciplines there. If we were to get somebody who says, I'm a fantastic writer, I know that my weather wall skills need a little bit of work. I graduated from, let's just say, for example, Iowa State. So it's like, we already know they got the knowledge. That's fine. And they're a great writer. And just because you might need a little wall work and you've already acknowledged that, well, guess what? We'll be able to review you back and forth, and we'll get you better quickly if you're going to be committed to our team. And so I wouldn't really back off of that. The worst that an employer can say is no, if you give it your best effort. And on television side of things, there might be a post that says we require 1 year of experience or we require 2 years of experience. Apply anyway. Unless it says we need a master's, apply anyway. Because as Justin said, I think it was Justin who said, don't try and steer your way around it if you don't have the experience. But if you got a Bachelor of Science and they're looking for 2 years experience and you don't have any, well, maybe they're not going to get the experience they want to get, and they'll take you instead because you've got yourself up there and you've proven to them that you can handle the job. So it never hurts to apply, in my opinion.
Totally agree.
Yeah, that's great. Morgan, some other questions maybe on the chat there?
Yeah, I see one. Personally, I've applied to positions in the past that I was not 100% qualified for. The hope was that they would consider more of an entry-level employee. Any advice on writing a cover letter for such a scenario? I know it's important to be honest and not oversell yourself. How would you recommend approaching that? Oh, Kai is literally addressing my topic as I wrote that. So thank you, Kai.
And
we do have some other ones though.
Yeah, there's one a little further up there too, I think. Oh, some other in the Q&A section too, yeah.
Yeah, so let's start this. So how would a good cover letter be organized? Do you need to hit directly about the position first, or do you have to start with your background?
I think it goes, we were talking earlier, to the point of, what will draw the hiring manager in right away. So if it is something about your background, or if it's more almost that you want to weave the position and your background together, whatever you feel is best to really draw them in. It's like when you're writing, we said earlier, writing a story, what will draw people's attention. So it's kind of, that's where your artistic skill comes into when creating the cover letter.
I 100% agree with that. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. I mean, for me personally, I start off talking about the particular office that I'm applying for and kind of weaving some of my background into that. And then if I have a story to tell, which the last time I applied for jobs, I had a story to tell. I told the story in the first half, and then I closed it out talking about what I could bring to the table for that particular office. So I don't think there's any right or wrong answer in there, and I think that's part of the unique opportunity that a cover letter brings. You can be creative, and it doesn't have to be a stock way. There's no right or wrong. It just let your personality shine through naturally.
Follow-up question to that is fonts to avoid?
I think you just want to stick with something typical. Don't make it, the real cursive one, that it's hard to read. Again, it goes back to touch base with a couple other people. If you're trying to be creative and going outside the norm, have someone else read it and just see if any red flags that come right to their attention.
Yeah, I was going to say, I totally agree with that. And I think, it's going to be a lot more impactful if the content of the cover letter is something that stands out as opposed to the font of the cover letter standing out. So keeping the font, kind of just your standard, the sort of type, I think is probably the best approach, and focus on, what the content is instead.
I fully agree with that. And the last thing you want to have happen is the hiring manager has to try and squint to read what you're writing, or try and figure out what that old English loopy thing is. And it's not really easy to read. It's kind of like reading somebody's print letter versus an old classic cursive letter. It kind of makes you slow down in a way, but at the same time, I guess I'd keep it really consistent. We've never changed fonts at the station for forever. And I guess I don't even know what would be a good font aside from just maybe a default. You open up your document and start with whatever the default is. I guess avoid tons of italics or other stuff that isn't quite as standard. I just kind of keep it just pretty straight throughout. That's just my thought.
And I would say always send your resume and cover letter as PDFs. Too often they come in as a Word document. In some Word documents, the defaults show all the markups. And so then it just looks like someone had something with a bunch of errors. So send them in PDFs. It's the best thing to do.
Yes, very good recommendation.
Okay, so we have another question here, and then Irene's sending some stuff from social media too. So one is there anything your specific industries, such as broadcast, weather service, agriculture, et cetera, look for in job candidates that might not apply across the board?
First thing that came to mind, but I think, it would still apply across the board, is just the writing skills. I guess Kai might be more for the broadcast side, but you still, with communications, you may think, all right, here's this example. You're an operational forecaster and you may think, okay, I'm not the best writer. I don't need to hit on that. Well, you do want to put anything that you want to emphasize your communication skills, because for any job, not just related to meteorology, you're not going to work in a bubble. You're going to have to communicate to your coworkers. You might be writing discussions. So it's not quite your answer, I know, sorry, but I just thought it'd be a good part to put this in, is that, you do want to emphasize, maybe to the point, the answer to the question is, don't really think that way. Kind of don't pigeonhole yourself into just focusing on those skills, but think outside the box and think, okay, maybe I should emphasize more on my writing skills, or maybe these other skills that put me above the rest.
Well, and I think in the broadcast sector, it's just one of those scenarios where we know what we're going to be doing. We have to take really complicated information and we have to disperse it out to an audience at roughly an 8th grade level is what we have to shoot for. That's kind of what we try and shoot for. And we can read all the technical great discussions from the National Weather Service. And I know a lot of great forecasters in the National Weather Service who can barely stand up in front of a group of people and talk. And their strength is obviously on the forecast and the math and the mind side of everything. And we've got to take everything that's really complicated and we've got to disperse that out to the public in a very simple, easy way. And so for us, we're really trying to look for How can you communicate something like that in a simple fashion? And can you do it comfortably? And can people trust you to deliver on that? And in no way is this, any kind of a comment to, not have to stress about your grades as much. But if I get somebody who's really, really, really super duper proud of an extremely high GPA, but can't speak, then unfortunately broadcast is probably not going to work for you, even though you're extraordinarily smart. The field still needs you. But as I like to tell people, you're too smart to be on TV. NCAR needs you. Get over there and work on modeling, work on research, because that's where the industry needs somebody like that. Somebody who can just talk and talk and talk. That's where I'll be, So that's kind of how I see things going, is verbal communication is definitely a strength on our side of the industry.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point that Kai made about, there is variability even across, the private sector. When we're looking at candidates, we're a lot more focused on we'd love to have somebody that's great with forecasting too, but more important is we're looking for somebody that's a solid forecaster, shows an ability to learn, and is a great communicator, and also has really is a really good team player. Those are kind of the more important things. The forecasting side of it, we're all learning. Every day we're trying to become better forecasters. So there's some room for growth there, but that's kind of specific to our niche. Whereas if you're going to NCAR, it's a lot more important that you're going to have that really great knowledge base to work off of from the science end of it.
Yep, that's great.
So let's see, we'll move on. We have a question from social media. Many jobs are now having easy apply options and they don't require a cover letter. Is there a way to go around that? For example, do you recommend separate email to HR or the hiring manager?
I would suggest, go ahead, Justin.
Okay. Well, I would suggest doing it anyways. Speaking from my experience, I know applying for weather service jobs, you can apply for multiple at a time, but there's only I think one place to upload a cover letter. So folks go about it different ways. I tend to actually send a personalized note to an MIC and attach a PDF of my cover letter because I want to tailor it to different offices and send it off that way. So that's kind of the way I work around it. But, if there's a way to do it, I would do it because that's something that would set you apart from everyone else that's probably just going to slide a resume in there and then go about their business.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think it all boils down. It shows that you care when you take that extra time because, and I see also one of the questions is, are cover letters required or it's listed as optional? Even if they're optional, when someone sends me a cover letter or applies and includes that cover letter, to me, it's not just also telling more about yourself. It just shows you care really about working at the company. And also you're a hard worker and will go the extra step.
I'll tell you, one of the things that kind of drives us wild when we had a job search, this would have been probably 5 or 6 years now, I think, when this would have occurred, is that we wound up with a job applicant that we reached out to that didn't know they applied because they had hired an agent to do it for them. And so immediately we went, no, because you don't even know you're applying for a company. So if you don't even know that you're trying to come here, basically what would happen is they would hire somebody to say, yeah, I'm looking to get to this town at this point of my career or something. And they just find jobs and send information to people, but don't do that. I can tell you that we would not mess with that because when you do, even if it's just a paragraph and you email the news director and maybe you email the chief meteorologist together as one and say, hey, I saw your job post and I see that you're only requiring a YouTube link or something. I want to let you know that I am applying and I'm excited to talk to you further or something along those lines. And I know that sounds kind of like a generic approach, but they're not requiring a cover letter in that case. So because you took the time to find both the news director and the chief meteorologist emails and take the time to compose a special message to them, would give you a better chance than somebody who just slides something through an inbox anonymously, in my general opinion. So I totally agree with Christina on that.
One other thing that I will just mention, I don't know if everyone would agree with this or not, but the one thing that I would be cautious about, and I've had this happen before, is calling. You know, I mean, I would go with the email route personally rather than, or, you know, some other form of writing rather than trying to call directly in. That, I think, for me anyway, goes back to the over-aggressive, you know, angle that I was talking about earlier, and can be a little bit of a turn off at that stage of the application process.
Great. And Justin also answered one of the questions that we were waiting for in your response. So that was perfect. Thank you. So the next question is, say your graduation date's not set in stone, sometime within the next year, but you see a job opening that you're interested in. Do you have a recommendation on how best to address that or handle it in the cover letter?
I guess I'd be upfront with it. You know, you can address, I plan to graduate at this time. And, you know, because then me as a hire, you know, when I'm reviewing your resume and cover letter, I get that information and say I feel, okay, unfortunately at this time, you know, we need someone immediately. Still, I could save your resume off for future use. So.
That very thing happened to me. I was hired in February of 2007, and I worked part-time up to graduation until May of 2007. And it was the internships leading up to that kind of was, and those are non-paid, just volunteers. They could kind of get a feel of what I was like to begin with. But I would be absolutely upfront about it. And I wouldn't let it deter you as much either, as you might think. I mean, unless you're talking about, if you're in the same town, especially, that you're applying for the job for. So for example, let's say you're in Ames and a Des Moines TV station really needs somebody really bad and you're one of the top of the list. Don't hesitate, because you're within, you know, a 40-minute drive now that you could work it out. But otherwise, like if you're trying to apply to something at Boulder and you're down in Alabama, that's going to be a little more difficult, unless maybe you could do some remote stuff. But I wouldn't let it deter you, but I would be very, very forthcoming on that immediately to say, I'm graduating in 3 months. What can you do? Things like that. We actually, one of our interns last summer just got a job down at Kirksville, Missouri, and he got hired before he was graduated. So it happened to one of our interns as well. So we've seen that before.
Yeah, I would say don't underestimate the power of making an impression on someone. I mean, like Christina and Kai mentioned, you never know what, if you make a good first impression, you never know what doors are going to open later. So, you know, do it anyways and see what happens.
The worst they can do is say no, but if you didn't try, then you never know. So, and with us too, if there's someone that, you know, again, is that we can't hire them right away, maybe we'll bring them in the job shadow. And the networking too is huge. So it will open doors, but if you don't try, then there's never that chance to open that door.
This industry is extremely small, and a lot of people know a lot of other people kind of within our own areas. And I'm fairly confident that I bet Justin can name off about a dozen National Weather Service officers outside of his office. And I could do the same with broadcasters as well. And let's say you were somebody like right now, and you're trying to apply for something. You know, college is all messed up right now because of the virus stuff. And all of a sudden they have a leading job candidate that suddenly falls through in July. And they say, who is that person who's graduating again? I wonder if they're still out there. And then you might be right back in the running again and you didn't even know it. So yeah, go for it. Really, if you think you could make it work, even before graduating, there's absolutely no harm in not trying for it. And if nothing else, you may have just put a footstep in for the networking thing, which can help you down the line.
And that's what you're going to, go ahead, Justin.
And to kind of piggyback off of that point, Kai, meteorology is a small community. So if you're shotgunning out letters all over the place and it's basically the same letter to different people, we all talk to each other. So word is going to get out about that. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, to the point of, say you see something and there will be some time, address that in the cover letter. That's the point for the cover letter. Say, I understand this is the situation, but I can do this, say it is where you have just 2 classes and you have a lot of extra time. Say, I am willing to work part-time, or if it'll work with your schedule, maybe I can do some training to be ready for that start date. Again, use that. And to all the points of being a small community, also in life, as you're going through your career, don't burn bridges in this, with the meteorology community is so small. So just a little point for also after you get the job.
All right. We have several good questions here that I want to make sure we get to. What's an effective way of incorporating a specific example or story into the cover letter to highlight like a skill in customer service, say? Yeah.
I mean, I would say a great way is just, at least in a lot of situations, is again going back to what's been said earlier with trying to weave that in with both your experience and your what the job is, but lead into it right away and say, listen, I know customer service is a big component of this position, and here's a story of a situation where I was able to show that. I would do, I think in most situations anyway, I would tend to put that earlier on rather than later in the cover letter, if that's what you think the most important thing is that you could or one of the most important things that you could bring to the position is, and don't bury it too far down in there.
So for me, with my previous, when I applied for the Seattle office, for example, I know that there's a lot of, decision support is a big buzzword in the Weather Service. And I was put in a position in a Tallahassee office where I got a lot of experience doing that, including deployments for actual weather events. So Hurricane Michael, for example. So I told the story about what I did for Hurricane Michael and kind of how the lead up to that with organizing teams and such to make that deployment possible, because I knew that that's what the Seattle office was looking for, and the opportunities that they have being in the major metropolitan area. So doing your homework and then tying that in. But I told that story early on in the cover letter, and tied it to not only the Seattle office, but the whole agency's mission. So, that kind of, it weaves in doing your homework, knowing the position you're applying for and knowing what they're looking for. That all kind of came together for me. So that's, those are the steps I would take to incorporating that into the cover letter.
On Dominic's question there, part of it was you tell a story like Justin and Joel were talking about, but how do you make it efficient when you only have 1 page to tell a story? Is it better to just give the broad strokes and then tease that you have more information to share with them? I can, or how do you do that when you have such tight constraints on space?
I would hit the high points for sure. Let's see. I think definitely teasing that you have more, because what you want to do is set the stage. I mean, you have the information in your resume. And of course, I'm speaking from experience where my resume is super long. It's like a life story where I have the the luxury of explaining things out more, where I know in the private sector you don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
So you want to set yourself up to have that question asked or be put in that position during the interview to elaborate on that more. So I would definitely hit the high points. Definitely write about how that affected your company, your current company, or your current situation if you're applying for entry-level jobs, toward the end of that story, just to tie everything together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
just as one example that I've seen before, I mean, I remember, one where it was somebody talking about, it was some sort of a retail position, but talking about how there had been a staffing, issue, and that they were asked, to take at the last minute, all of a sudden, to take a larger role that they really didn't have, a lot of experience to step into. And how they took that on and they were successful, and they were told they did a good job, and that would fit well with our company because it shows how they're able to, even when they're not necessarily prepared already going into that situation, they were willing to take that on, and they were willing to, be part of the team and really step up in that situation. So, I mean, they were able to do that in a paragraph, and didn't, go into too much detail, but I think, that's the sort of thing.
Yeah.
I would, though, just caution, don't over exaggerate or stretch the truth, because anything you put on your resume and cover letter is fair game, and you could be asked about it. And so if you over exaggerate or kind of stretch the truth, yeah, I did this. Well, if you're asked about it, it'll come out. The truth will.
On the TV side, a lot of news directors and chiefs and weather teams are kind of looking for those that are already in the industry. What kind of severe weather experience do you have? And even though a lot of viewership is tied to severe weather, quite frankly, any kind of inconvenient weather will cause viewership spikes, and that can be snow events, large rain events, big wind events that happen. It doesn't have to be your classic severe weather scenario, and you might just discuss a time when you just had a huge severe weather event in your market. Now, if you're a student and you're trying to get in and you obviously don't have any broadcast experience behind you, were you part of your local AMS chapter who volunteered and handed bottles of water out after this bad storm came through? Or did you visit a classroom to help comfort kids that were scared because that storm came through? That's still a great example of going beyond the minimum job description. And that can still be a really good story to tell a news director or a chief, to say, all of a sudden, if you're down to these two people, well, we have this one person here who clearly loves doing outreach, which is a huge component of the broadcast sector, or we have this person who didn't do anything. Well, the one that, even as simple as doing some school visits as a college student, like an AMS chapter, could be enough to get you in the door. You just don't know. So that's kind of where I would gear it, at least on the broadcast side. Talk about an inconvenient weather situation where you were there for people, and they really appreciated the fact that you were there for them. That's where I would start on the broadcast side for that.
This is a good question that I think would be great to hear your thoughts on. So I don't have a BS in science, but I have years of on-air and schooling in broadcast meteorology. Can you still apply for other meteorology jobs? Do transferable skills and experience have leverage? And how can you be sure that you're not overlooked because they don't see the bachelor degree?
I think you would want to stress all your experiences. That, again, would be something to address, because a lot of our jobs, we say BS or years of experience. So that's what you got to stress on. And again, putting your experiences higher, like on your resume, I wouldn't have my education there the first thing I'm reading. I would have my experiences listed first. So it kind of goes back to being the artist of, putting the most relevant stuff first for the hiring manager.
I think on the TV side, you'd see a broadcast post of some kind requiring some kind of experience. We would like to see some kind of degree, but we also know that if you've been in the business 3, 4, 5 years, and you've obviously succeeded in those 3, 4, 5 years, that it may not be quite as heavyweight as what it was 5 years ago. Some of the job posts around some of the big companies in Cedar Rapids here that don't happen to be meteorology based would say something along the lines of you need a degree in X, Y, and Z, or in the absence of a degree, 7 years experience, or 8 years experience, or 5 years experience. If you have that, apply anyway. I mean, you just don't know. I would say on the TV side, though, if you have 5 years in the business and there is no degree associated with your name, there's a good chance you're fine. I mean, if you have on-air background, I would say that absolutely go ahead and see. And that's the kind of stuff that in an interview, probably the weather team would talk to you about, news director might talk to you about a little bit. But we've seen sometimes in this business, you'll have a news reporter even sometimes fill in for weather in a jam. I mean, it can happen. And so if you've got experience and you can tell the weather story, then I would absolutely still encourage applying for things, even if you don't have the formal degree, because if you're still a strong candidate, I mean, the team is probably still going to look at you. So I wouldn't let that deter you necessarily.
It's good. Do you have some other questions, Morgan?
Yeah, we have two more. So there's one
Rapid
that
fire.
I think is good to add. Okay. So we'll start with, what are your thoughts on nameless resumes to filter out any unconscious bias? Do you prefer it or not prefer it?
So I guess this would be on the top of your resume, your name's not listed. I'm assuming that's what that means.
I think so.
I think it would be hard to, I think it'd be hard to see your resume without a name, because still you have to have a way to connect with the person. And so I've actually never seen that one that doesn't have a name on it. So
I'm with Christina on that. I've never even heard of such a thing. I'd put your name on your work. That's what I would. Yeah, exactly.
Another quick question just came in. Anybody have any thoughts about out-of-state or Canadian applicants?
Again, I think that's with knowing, your audience. At AccuWeather, we welcome anyone to apply. And so I think I wouldn't let that deter you from applying, because people move. I mean, how often are people, they stay in their states? I mean, I don't think really for many companies that would deter me or most people from talking to you.
All right, we have 2 minutes left, so we'll finish with one. This is a really good question to end on. Best practices on thank you emails after an interview.
I guess I would say, one of the things is, I mean, it doesn't have to be right away, but I think, if it's fairly soon after the interview, it's a good thing just to show that, it really meant something, to you to come in and have the ability to, have that, that interview. And also just, really hitting home on some of showing that you were listening. I mean, I know in our interviews, we're talking about what's important, a lot of what, I've talked about here today, but show that you were listening and kind of, say, I know this is important, for this job, and this is how, I feel like I could really meet that. And the other thing is, if you feel like there was any area that you were lacking in, or maybe you didn't give the answer you wanted to, don't just ignore that either. You can address that head on there, because chances are we're talking about that, after the interview, and it would be helpful to know, that you realize that too, and that you want to, kind of revisit that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything Joel just said. In the situation where if you already know the outcome, if you didn't get hired or something along those lines, still say thank you, but use it as an opportunity to see if the interviewer would be gracious enough to sit down and give you some feedback. One, that leaves a good impression, and two, that can set you up for success for future interviews.
Those are all great points. Looks like we have one other question, Morgan, or we can.
Do you want to finish
round it
with
up?
this last one? It's
Yeah,
about
I guess
social
so.
media. How often are employers looking into your social media for work or behavior?
I think it's one of those, I don't look at everyone's social media, but just kind of to our point earlier, the meteorology community is small, so you never know who's going to see what you post. And so you just want to, if you're on social media, just be smart about it, be professional. You never know what's going to share. You never know what someone's going to see and pass it along to, someone they know when they say, oh, this person has applied. So I think in anything, you just have to be careful what you post online and be professional about it.
I think that's a great key, Christina. Always be professional about it. There's an MIC in the Weather Service. I was doing a leadership course, and he asked a question to the room: "How many of you have private social media?" And people raise their hand, and he goes, "No one should have raised their hand because it's all fair game." And to your point, everyone everyone may not look at it, but someone will. And small community, we all talk to each other, so keep that in mind.
We will use it quite often, actually, because all we can get from it is additional information. And that's one of those roundabout ways too, where sometimes, if you're not careful, some kind of really, really stupid social media post can cost you a really excellent job. So people just look you up and see what's on there. And if there's nothing on there, then we're probably pretty good to go, or nothing that's out of the ordinary. If there's a lot of complaining on a post, then I might already view you, unfortunately, prejudged as a complainer. And unfortunately, because I would have seen your profile and it's nothing but complaints and pages, then, is that the type of person you really are? So I'd be, really smart and really cautious about what you're doing online, because there's no way to get rid of it. Once it's out there, it's out there. So be careful with it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing, although it also could use to your advantage, is sometimes I've had someone share, they saw a student was posting all this really neat information. They were a real go-getter. So it can work to your advantage too. So you do think of the positive, but also be cautious there with doing anything negative.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, you can work it both ways. Yep, that's true. We've had experiences like that with our company, Joel, too, where we found people, like Kai was saying, that were just way too negative, and it just didn't seem like they'd be a good fit with our teams.
Right. Yeah, I think, I don't want to make it seem like, when we go and look, we're not, drilling down into every little bit. We're just trying to get a general overview. And if you see a similar theme running through, a lot of of posts that seems negative, or seems like, it just doesn't come across properly, then that can be a concern. It doesn't mean that we're going to be worried about whether somebody was having a good time or whatever, that kind of stuff. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking more at it from a personality standpoint, to try to I think, like Kai said, to try to get a little bit of insight into somebody's personality. So make sure that you're careful with that.
All right, I guess we better finish it off here. Thank you all so much for your contributions today. Seems like everyone got a lot out of it. We had a lot of attendees today, and thank you, Morgan, for your help with the questions, and thank you, Justin, Christina, Kai, and Joel, and also thank you, Irene, for the social media support there as well in those questions, and appreciate all your time. Thank you. Have a good rest of your quarantine, I guess, but hang in there, everybody. So,
thank you, everybody. Take care.
Stay healthy. Yep. Take care. Bye.